Let's go Dolphins fans. Tensions are rising in Miami, and today I have something that will hit you hard. Ever get that feeling that something isn't right behind the scenes, even when the team looks good on paper? Well, buckle up, because the Dolphins' path to the Super Bowl isn't just about staying healthy or hoping for the best. No, it goes much deeper. There are decisions being made, players being trusted or benched that can shape the entire season. And I'm not just talking about game plans. I'm talking about the locker room dynamics, the internal politics, and the kind of stakes that could either get us to Las Vegas for the big game or send us back to where we always end up, disappointed in December. I've got inside angles, locker room whispers, and comparisons that should grab every Dolphins fan's attention. And I'm going to cover it all. But first, be sure to like this post if you've been following this team through all the disappointment. And if you've been a Dolphins fan for 20 plus years, leave this in the comments. Go Dolphins! My heart bleeds teal and orange. Now let's dive straight into this, because what I'm about to tell you could change how you see this team heading into 2025. The Miami Dolphins are clearly making moves in 2025 with a vision in mind, but not all of them are safe bets. And while the organization is quick to highlight the positives, behind the curtain we're dealing with some calculated risks and a few ticking time bombs. We're talking redemption stories, attitude makeovers, and career-defining moments. One name that jumps right into that storm is Deontay Johnson. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. Deontay Johnson's recent track record is sketchy at best. This is a guy who was cut not once, but twice in a single month by playoff teams, the Ravens and the Texans. That's not a red flag. That's a whole siren. For a player once seen as a rising star with electric speed and surgical route running, Johnson's spiral into NFL purgatory has been stunning. But what makes this story even more gripping is that when the league turned its back, only one team called, the Browns. And for Johnson, that call was a wake-up. He said it himself on a podcast. He hit rock bottom. That humbling reality may have been the jolt he needed to face the truth. He's not a rising star anymore. He's a guy trying to keep his job. Now, the reason this matters to us in Dolphins land is because it puts into perspective the kind of desperate energy players around the league are dealing with. And if Johnson can turn that desperation into production, it raises the bar for everyone, including the Dolphins' own wide receiver core. We've got our stars, no doubt. But what happens when the margins tighten? When the game's on the line and the next man up has to deliver? Johnson's story echoes a theme that's very real in Miami. High expectations meet internal chaos. The Browns gave him one last shot because nobody else wanted him, and in Miami, we're seeing similar vibes with players who are being stretched thin, not necessarily because they lack talent, but because they're being asked to do too much in a system that doesn't always play to their strengths. That brings us to the Dolphins' defense, which, like Cleveland's in 2024, has often found itself bailing out the offense. It's mentally exhausting. Just like Martin Emerson in Cleveland, some of our corners have been breaking down, not because they've forgotten how to cover, but because they're constantly under siege. The parallel is real. When your defense is stretched to the limit week after week, it breaks down, not physically, but mentally. Confidence slips, and so does the swagger. Grant Delpit's situation up north only adds another layer. He spent 2024 out of sync, constantly compensating for a safety partner he didn't trust. Sound familiar, Dolphins fans? We've seen moments in our own secondary where breakdowns weren't about talent. They were about communication and chemistry. Delpit got reset with Thornhill out, and maybe that's what our own backfield needs. Clarity, not just talent. So what's the message here? The league is brutal, and the Dolphins don't have the luxury of waiting around for potential to pan out. Mike McDaniel needs to create a structure where the Emersons and Delpits of our roster, the ones with high ceilings but recent struggles, can return to form. That means Greer can't keep fumbling personnel decisions. He's had his chances, and while some of the gambles are justified, Dolphins fans know the margin for error is gone. There's one more layer that ties all this together, and that's mindset. Across the board, whether it's in Cleveland or Miami, what we're seeing is that redemption isn't just about talent. It's about attitude. It's about who's ready to grow up and who's still pointing fingers. Johnson, Delpit, Emerson, they're not just playing for contracts. They're playing to stay relevant. And in Miami, we've got guys in the exact same boat. You want to win a Super Bowl? Then you need more than star power. You need players willing to hold themselves accountable, even when the cameras aren't rolling. That's what separates the elite teams from the rest. And that's what will determine whether the 2025 Dolphins finally crack through or fade away in another year of empty promises. So here's my question to you. Do you believe the Dolphins have those players ready to step up the way the Browns are hoping for with Delpit, Emerson, and Johnson? Do we have that same hunger in our locker room? Are we structured for a real run, or are we just patching holes? Because here's the thing. if you really take a step back and look at what's happening in Cleveland with players like Delpit and Johnson, it's not just about them. It's a mirror for teams like Miami. These aren't just random guys fighting for another chance. They're a reflection of what happens when franchises bet on traits, not character. And that's where Chris Greer keeps making the same mistake over and over again. He looks at combined scores, highlight reels, and social media hype, but he keeps missing the part that actually wins championships: football IQ, accountability, and emotional maturity. Let's bring it back home. The Dolphins have invested heavily in potential. From big names like Jalen Waddle and Javon Holland to riskier moves like the Chubb trade, there's talent all over this roster. But what we don't have, at least not yet, is a fully unified locker room culture that squeezes the best out of everyone. Mike McDaniel has a vision, no doubt, but he's also trying to hold together a team filled with personalities that range from laid back to overly confident to outright disconnected. And if you don't have alignment, you don't have a Super Bowl roster, you just have names on paper. Look at what Delpit said through his actions last season. He couldn't trust the guy next to him, and it cost him. That's exactly what's been plaguing parts of our own defense. Too often we've seen breakdowns not because of poor coaching or lack of effort, but because someone didn't believe their teammate would be in the right spot. That's why communication is everything. That's why these emotional resets, these fresh starts like Delpit is getting, can actually make all the difference. The Dolphins need their own version of that. Someone in this locker room has to be the emotional compass. Someone has to draw that line in the sand and say, we're either all in or we're wasting our time. And with all due respect to Tua, Tyreek, and Ramsey, it hasn't happened yet. Not consistently. Not when it matters most. And we've seen it. Those fourth quarter collapses, the red zone misfires, the blown coverages on third and long. That's not talent failing. That's culture cracking. And speaking of culture, we can't ignore Deontay Johnson's situation. That man said no to playing in the cold. Let that sink in. You're an NFL player. Your job is literally to perform no matter what. And you decide the weather is too much? That's not just a red flag. It's the kind of energy that can poison a locker room. And yet, he's also the kind of player who, if he figures it out, becomes a lethal weapon. That's the double-edged sword of NFL personnel decisions. And that's the gamble Greer loves to make, even though history shows he rarely wins those bets. So the real question becomes, are the Dolphins ready to stop gambling and start building? Are we finally ready to prioritize the right kind of players, not just the fast ones, but the ones who don't fold when adversity hits? Because in a year where everything is on the line, we can't afford any more Deontay Johnson-type mistakes. We can't bring in a guy who's more concerned with comfort than competition. If there's one thing that Browns fans are hoping for, it's that these redemption arcs work. But Dolphins fans, we shouldn't be hoping. We should be demanding. Demanding better scouting, better locker room leadership, and a front office that actually knows how to put together a championship-caliber team instead of always chasing one. You want to talk about windows? Ours is open, but barely. Tyreek Hill isn't getting younger. Terran Armstead is one hit away from the sideline, and we still don't know if Tua can go the distance when the lights are brightest. That's the brutal truth. So if we're not making the right decisions, if we're still dragging our feet on roster issues, still letting Greer fumble away valuable time, we're going to waste what might be the best core this franchise has had in decades. And I know it hurts to hear that. I know we all want to believe this is the year. But belief without execution is just noise. That's why every move from here on out matters. Every signing, every cut, every minute of practice, and most of all, every ounce of accountability inside that building. So tell me, Dolphins fans, do you trust this front office to make the right calls down the stretch? Do you believe in this roster as it stands today? Or do we need to see something drastically different before we buy in? Drop your comments below. Let's talk about it. And if this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dive Dolphins content, and check out the videos on the screen now for more insights that go beyond the headlines. Go Dolphins!